all of us are here to heal on some level. We're here to heal our childhood wounds. We're here to heal, the collective. We're here to heal. I realized in that moment, oh, this is it. She's going. And then I looked at her and I literally saw her spirit exit her body. It was the craziest thing. And then I, just laid her back. And as that was going on, I just was telling her, I love you. I love you. I love you. Because I was thinking to myself, this woman brought me into the world. And as hard as this is right now, I get to be with her as she leaves the world. It would be interesting for us to kind of look at dis-ease in the physical body as a way that our body is speaking to us so that we can learn certain things that we wouldn't learn had that not happened. What do we choose to do with ourselves every day? Do you want to create in the world or do you want to consume? And when you're consuming, what are you getting from that? If you're getting something that's a lower frequency that doesn't really feel good, but you're kind of just like out of habit going back to that pattern, it's important to
Yeah,
kind of look
which
at
is super
that. We only need to feel an emotion for 90 seconds in order to process it. So if we know that we're feeling sad or upset or angry, look at the clock, allow yourself 90 seconds, and then exhale it out and move your body to release it.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang.
Britt, it is great to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
To start with, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what it is exactly that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a frequency artist and quantum guide or quantum healer. And the way that I got into that was a very windy road, but as most of us are on our journey, it's never a straight line. And so a frequency artist is kind of a different type of artist. I started out as just a traditional, I went to school to be an artist. I went to the Art Institute of Chicago or the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Um, and then I got my master's degrees in marriage and family therapy and art therapy. And at that time, I started showing my work just in traditional galleries. And I had my stuff in galleries across the United States with collectors around the world, which was pretty cool. And then things kind of shifted a little bit. A couple years, probably my mom got diagnosed in 2010 with lung cancer. And so that was one pivot. And I stopped painting at that period of time. And then I went back to painting in 2019, which was 2 years after my sister got diagnosed with cancer. And when I came back into painting, I had become a Reiki master. And so I realized when I was taking care of my sister that I had kind of a divine download, if you will, that I was to create artwork that would transmit healing frequencies. So using Reiki as a means to send healing to whoever was around each of my paintings. And so I created this whole sacred process, which is so different from any traditional art. And I had worked in hospitals. We can talk more about that too. But I had worked in hospital setting with oncology and pediatric patients and heart transplant as an art therapist. And so, kind of seeing the full roundabout scope of what the power of art and creativity is for healing and just for our souls in general. I am a completely different artist today than I was when I first started out, or even when I went to art school. I didn't even know that I could create art like this. So, and then I also help people who are kind of looking for to live with more purpose and to have kind of confidence and clarity in that. And so that's why I say I'm a quantum guide and a quantum healer, because even though I have my background in therapy and therapeutic practices, things have just gone on such a different road with my mom, my dad, and my sister all having cancer, and just kind of experiencing that through them and their journeys. I just see life in such a different way. And so I help other people to kind of come to that realization of why their soul is here in this life and kind of guiding them on how to get aligned with that. So that's kind of a long answer to your question.
No, that's perfect. You definitely have a long story behind it. Let's get into that a little bit more. So you went to college, more traditional art program, did traditional mental health practices with marriage and family therapy, you said?
Yeah, so yeah. Yeah, and I went to a lot of therapy when I was younger as well. So I experienced a lot of my everybody has their journey, everybody has their struggles. And so, I found therapy to be extremely helpful for me. And just going and having somebody to listen and so I always wanted to kind of do that for other people because I always had friends that looked to me to kind of help them with advice or to just listen to them. And so therapy really played a huge part in my kind of evolution. And then I got to a point, which is funny because now I feel like therapy is almost becoming antiquated for a lot of people. Like it still has its place and for, trauma and for, people that are experiencing things that are acute. I think it's really powerful. But I think for long term kind of personal evolution, I think you get to a point in therapy where you just start kind of digging up the same things. And so I feel like energy healing and just becoming more aware and conscious and living mindfully kind of expands on what you learn when you're in therapy. So I think therapy definitely has its place, but for me, I've kind of moved beyond that. And so that in the work that I do with people and just kind of how my artwork is and just kind of how I show up is just a little bit non-traditional. And I never would have thought that I would have ended up here from where I was, originally. My parents were both super like my dad was corporate, he was in that world, and my mom was an interior designer and she she did the interiors. We lived in Northern California and she did the interiors for, she worked with Steve Jobs for Apple in the 80s. And she worked for like Hewlett Packard and she did a lot of the interiors for the early Silicon Valley offices. And so she had to figure out how to put like a computer on the desks. And so things were a little bit different. So I came from like a pretty traditional background. And then, now I'm just not traditional at all. And so, I have 3 daughters and raising them and kind of, seeing how the world is changing has just been really interesting. It's a really interesting process. Yeah.
Yeah, and we really have a lot of overlap there because we often think of therapy or it's presented as an end all. Like if you're struggling, that's the place to go. That's always what's recommended. Talk to a
Yeah.
therapist, call a professional.
Yes.
And I do think it's really important for people to realize there are other places and modalities and even things that you in your particular situation might need. Obviously, from my perspective, a lot of times that leans towards horses.
Yes.
But I found the same thing in that because my background's also in psychology and it gives us some answers and we're talking about a lot more things, but it's not always like you don't always go there and things aren't fixed. And
Yeah.
sometimes we have to look a little bit farther. And so it's really great to know that there's a lot of other places that you can maybe explore and see if they're the things that you need. Tell us a little bit more about that journey for you from pretty traditional, pretty well-known paths that a lot of us follow after college, kind of, getting the degree, the certifications into what you do now and how that all came about.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I got my master's degrees, I worked and at the same time I got a certification. I did my practicum at California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco. And the program that I did that through was called the Institute for Health and Healing. And, San Francisco tends to be obviously pretty progressive in terms of everything. And so at this hospital and through this program, I was exposed to healing modalities. And this was like 25 years ago. I was exposed to, sweat lodges and shaman and, this guy, Wayne Mueller, came in and spoke, and he was married by Ram Dass. He and his wife, Ram Dass, married them. And so, like, I was exposed to all kinds of different healing modalities. The other programs that were getting their certifications at the same time as me to do the work that we were doing in the hospital setting were like massage, which at the time was pretty new to have massage in a hospital setting. And then there were chaplains, which were pretty common. And then there was guided visualization, which is interesting because in the quantum work that I do, there's a lot of visualization that I do. And I do have a lot of guided meditations on my podcast. The first season that I did was all meditations. And so I think with healing in particular, visualization is a really powerful modality. And so that goes along with the art that I do. And so, like, looking back at all of the things that I've done, but really like one of the turning points was that program when I was getting my master's degree at the Institute for Health and Healing, because it opened my eyes to the fact that traditional hospitals and hospital settings do have and do offer alternative therapies that are extremely complementary. And yet, even though there's these scientific studies that prove the validity of everything from like color therapy to art therapy to sound healing to all of the different therapies, there is still so much resistance and skepticism in the world because people are so programmed to believe that you go to a hospital, you go to a doctor, you go to a surgeon, you do these things, and that's how you heal. But people don't realize that your thoughts carry such a important and powerful importance in terms of how you experience life. And those thoughts have a frequency, and that frequency impacts your body physically, and energy gets stuck. And so people believe in acupuncture, right? Like, they know that acupuncture is powerful and it can help people to relieve pain, and, it helps with fertility and all of these things. And that's all based on the energy systems and the meridians in our bodies. And I know that horses actually have a lot of tools and things that people use that are energy and frequency based that are super interesting. Like, there's something that I wear around my neck. It's called a Q link. Have you heard of this? The Q
I
link?
haven't.
So it's got copper in it, and then it basically, for me, the reason that I wear it is so that my body and my energy system is balanced with all of the frequencies that are around us. And I know that people use they have different things that you can put onto horses that affects their performance and affects their joints and things like that, so that the energy is flowing in them. I am not a scientist, obviously, so I can't speak to this from like a scientific perspective. But I do know that there is a lot of science out there to support, that the energy and keeping your energy flowing, and copper in particular is very powerful. So like on the backs of my paintings, on the wire that goes across, the wire itself is not made of copper, but I put a copper coil around it so that it balances the energy of the painting forever, And so, the Q link that I wear is over my heart. So, in your hearts are basically like, the battery of our body, supposedly. And so, it's keeping everything balanced. And so just going back to the skeptics out there, and I've had a lot of people who've been very skeptical about my artwork and whether or not it sends healing frequencies. And my response is, whether you believe in it or not, just knowing the intention behind it is tuning your mind into the frequency of that possibility. So I think it's interesting also, like when it comes to horses, I have always been very sensitive to horses. I grew up going to camp when I was a kid. I had this experience, which is kind of sad, but at the same time, like, it was so beautiful, because I was like, when I was about 6 years old, maybe 5, I had a camp that I went to in the summer, and I had a horse that I got. There were farm animals, and I had a horse. My horse was Chocolate Chip, and there were other horses, and I got to wash the horse and, brush it. And I was so proud. And then the next day we went to camp to find out who won, like the contest of whose horse was the cleanest. And I saw that I had won the contest. The reason that I won is because Chocolate Chip was really old and he had died in the night. So
Oh, no.
they gave me this, and I was like, I don't know why. I was still so proud that I won the award, because Chocolate Chip and I bonded so well, you know what I mean? And so, like, I just loved this horse. It wasn't even mine. It was just the one that I took care of at camp, And from from just a young age, I always felt like this wonderful bond with horses. My parents had a place up in Idaho, and the property next door. There are horses that do like the what do you call it in winter? The sleigh ride. They lead the sleigh. And so
Mm-hmm.
in the summer, they would keep them in the pasture that was right next to my parents' house. And so every summer we looked forward to going up there and spending time, and they would come over and we would give them apples and carrots and just like bathe in their beautiful, glorious energy, you know, and it was so healing just being around them. And so anyway, and then also I think I told you about this before, but my nephew, he did equine therapy. He has autism.
Uh-huh.
And there was a horse that he's very low functioning, but he has a really good memory and he's very intelligent. I know he's in there, you know, he can't express himself. Anyway, so this horse, Kate, he's 25 now, but he started working with Kate when he was about 8 years old, and he just still remembers Kate. If you bring up Kate, he just lights up because he had such a beautiful connection with her. So, anyway, long story short, I just think that for me in particular, when I went from sort of the more traditional, I've always been open to the nonlinear path. I've always been open to the non-traditional. I don't know why that is, because the rest of my family is not that way. And so maybe it's just because I knew on some level that this was kind of the direction that I was going to be going in. I'm not sure. But but I feel like the older that I've gotten, sort of the weirder I get. Like the more I'm open to more alternative things, and the more I attract people into my life who are experiencing, you know, I have one person who just bought one of my paintings who's got stage 4 cancer, and she's not going through any traditional healing modalities. And so, you know, and she's healing, you know, so, and she's living every life with just like the most beautiful joy, and, you know, she's trying everything and she's not afraid to. And so I think all of us are here to heal on some level. You know, we're here to heal our childhood wounds. We're here to heal, you know, the collective. We're here to heal. And so I think, you know, any healing modalities that you can tap into, or that you resonate with, or that you have any curiosity toward in any way, will help you to expand and heal ultimately. So, you know, again, going back to those skeptics, I think if you are driven by curiosity and your heart is leading you toward any type of healing modality, I think it's important to just explore it, even if it's just reading an article or a book, you know, before you actually spend money, and to see if that's something that will actually help. So, anyway,
Yeah, that's definitely something that brings a lot of people to horses. They just feel something inside them and they can't resist it. And then the next thing they know, they're with horses and owning horses and in this beautiful world where they share life with horses. So that's neat.
yeah, yeah,
Talk to us a little bit more about your experience, your family, and cancer. You had something that said the grief was relentless but beautiful. And I thought that phrase was so interesting because you experienced a lot of loss.
yeah. Yeah, it was funny, because not funny, but interesting, because I never knew anybody who died, really. You know, like I had a boyfriend from college who died from cancer when he was 29, and my oldest daughter at the time, I only had one child at the time. She was like 8 weeks old or something when my boyfriend from college died, and I remembered going to his funeral and thinking, like, this is the first person that I know who I've been close with who's passed. And then in 2010, so my oldest daughter was 12. In 2010, my mother passed. So she was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she was the one in our family that we thought would live forever. Nobody in her family had cancer, but 2 years before she passed, her only brother died from pancreatic cancer. And then his only daughter just passed away from cancer as well. So
Mm.
my mother and her brother grew up. Um, my grandmother had a garden center, and they used to run through the fields where they would spray the pesticides. And I suspect that's probably why they had cancer. And so when my mom got diagnosed, she was the woman who was going to the gym to exercise. She was always eating salads and eating healthy, you know, like everybody thought she was going to live to be the oldest. And so when she got diagnosed, she was 67 years old, and everybody was like, what? You know, we all kind of were like, it was just a total record scratch moment for so many of us, for my sister, for my dad, for my cousins, and so that was kind of a wake up. And then, what's interesting is my mom was total type A. I told you she was an interior designer, but she started out as a design assistant and worked herself up to be partner in the firm. And this was in the 80s. Do you know what I mean? Like a woman doing that in
Yeah,
the
very
80s with two
impressive.
men. Yeah. So this was like a big deal. But she was a badass. Like, excuse my French, but she just was. And she just was like, one of those people who was just like determined to do whatever she wanted to do in life. So when she got sick, it was interesting because the first thing that she did was go to the Chopra Center, which was like so far outside of her box. Like, and the only reason why she went is because I was friends. I was in a business mastermind with a man whose father was business partners with Deepak. And my friend had done all of the courses and things that they had offered at he was in charge of the courses at the Chopra Center. And so when my mom got diagnosed, I sent him an email and said, hey, my mom just got diagnosed with lung cancer. Do you or your dad have any recommendations for her? So she went down to the Chopra Center. She learned how to meditate. She did a week-long retreat down there. She learned how to eat healthy. She came back with CDs. This was, back when people were still using CDs, but she had meditation CDs.
Yeah.
She had like this whole diet. She had all these books on quantum physics and, Deepak Chopra's people aren't really thinking so great of him now with the Epstein stuff that came out, but there was value in what he was teaching. And she definitely found peace in the process of learning how to meditate, and her energy completely shifted. So, I have a different view as a result of watching my mom go through this, because my mom and I were very close. I had a difficult relationship with my dad because I wasn't kind of the corporate ladder. Like my sister was more like he was, and I was kind of more creative, and he just didn't understand me. Whereas my mom was creative, so she did. And so anyway, when she got sick and watching her, I would meditate with her. I was already into all of these things, so it was nothing new for me, but it was so beautiful to witness her not being afraid of the cancer and not being afraid to try new things that were completely outside of her realm. And, she was the go to a therapist, go to a doctor, get a pill, do all of the things that, we're kind of taught to do. And so it's interesting to see her go outside of that. And then when she passed, I couldn't even speak at her memorial because I was the only one that was with her when she passed, and she passed in my arms. And at the moment that she passed, it was like I realized in that moment, oh, this is it. She's going. And then I looked at her and I literally saw her spirit exit her body. It was the craziest thing. And then I, just laid her back. And as that was going on, I just was telling her, I love you, I love you, I love you, because I was thinking to myself, this woman brought me into the world. And as hard as this is right now, I get to be with her as she leaves the world. And so, like, what is more beautiful than that? Do you know what I mean? Like, we come here I didn't think about that up until that moment. That wasn't like a thought. And so I don't know if I was receiving information to help, make it kind of a more gentle landing, or if my sort of higher self was aware of this or what was going on. But at the time, I just was going with it. And so things shifted for me significantly after that, because I just saw life in such a different way. And I didn't see dying as something that was something to be avoided, because you can't avoid it. We're all going to die. And so my mom, being this woman who we thought was going to live forever, and she was the first to go, was really a powerful moment for my girls. We were all actually living in my parents' house with them at that time, because we had a home that we were renting, and we were in between closing on a house that we were buying. So we were actually living in the house with my parents. My girls were asleep when my mom died. So it was like death was something that my girls were very familiar with. And then my father-in-law had dementia and he passed away. And then my sister got diagnosed. My father had bladder cancer, which wasn't as scary because his treatment was not that long and then he was fine. But when my sister got diagnosed, she was a later stage. And it was just my sister and I. And so it ended up being, a longer journey with my sister. It was 4 years. And she had 3 kids, or has 3 kids. And so, that was kind of a harder thing because, they have had to learn how to, kind of navigate the world without a mom, which many people do. And these kids are thriving. They're doing amazing. I'm going to my youngest nephew's college graduation in May. My sister would be so proud. And her daughter's doing great. And her oldest son that has autism is being well taken care of. And, so everything is fine. Everybody's doing all the things. But what's beautiful about the journeys that they all had is that every single relationship that they had before they got diagnosed versus after and then through their treatment was so beautiful. It allowed people to show up in ways that they never would have showed up had the cancer not happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, it allowed them to show how much my mom and my sister meant. It allowed them to just express themselves in ways and heal in ways that they wouldn't have been able to heal if that hadn't happened. So I just have a different view. I really do. And so this woman that just bought this painting, who has stage 4 cancer, her husband had just passed away less than a year ago. And so she saw this painting and it really spoke to her. And she's living this most beautiful life. And she really views cancer as a gift. And so, I think it would be interesting for us to kind of look at dis-ease in the physical body as a way that our body is speaking to us so that we can learn certain things that we wouldn't learn had that not happened. And of course, we don't want to get sick. Do you know what I mean? But when we do get sick, what is our body trying to tell us? And I know that horses actually have a really interesting instinct with this. I've seen some healers that work with these horses that know exactly what's going on physically, and they know how to, I don't know what their healing energy is, but it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some stories as well that would be described as miraculous when people
Yes.
have gone to work with horses. So,
Yeah.
um, talk with us about some of the things that you found helpful moving forward from that. And one thing you touched on was the power of our thoughts, which is such a huge one, something we don't really talk about in terms of health a lot of the time, but it is so impactful. And even as you were talking about that, some very tragic situations that lots of people would see, but you talked about it in a beautiful way. And how even just thinking about things and the way we choose to think about them can alter our entire experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we have a choice every single day what we focus on and how we react and show up to life as it presents itself to us. And I think, especially over the last few years, it's just been relentless in terms of what's been going on in the collective. And so I think a lot of people tend to, and I just actually wrote something on my Substack about kind of how to set yourself free right now from all the noise in the world, because it's like roadkill. When you're driving, you can't help but look at it. Do you know what I mean? What's going on in the news? And I think a lot of people, I've gotten into discussions, kind of heated ones with somebody. I don't get heated, but other people do, where they feel it's like you have a civic or a responsibility to know what's going on in the world. And unfortunately, I think it is important to know what's going on in the world to some degree. And you need to also check in with your body, because if you're having physical things going on with your body and you're tuning into things like the news every single day, you're not necessarily doing something that's good for you. And so our thoughts create energy and they carry a frequency. And so when that's in our body and it's stuck, and every day it's like the equivalent of eating something that's really bad for us, but we're thinking it. And so every day we're eating that thing that's really bad. And they say, like everything in moderation. Well, I don't know, with the news of the world these days, I don't even know if knowing that in moderation is good for us, because it's so everywhere that you look. It's local, it's national, it's, global. And so I personally believe that we have a choice. It all comes down to choices. what do we choose to do with ourselves every day? Do you want to create in the world, or do you want to consume? And when you're consuming, what are you getting from that? If you're getting something that's a lower frequency that doesn't really feel good, but you're kind of just like out of habit going back to that pattern, it's important to
Yeah.
kind of look
Which
at
is super
that, you
easy
know?
to go at. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, especially because everybody's got their phones, you know? So it's
Yeah,
important,
it's
I think,
everywhere.
yeah, it's important for people to really be questioning, like, why am I doing this? And if it's just out of habit, how can I shift that habit? So, one of the things that I wrote about today was creating a list of things that feel good to you. Like, what are the things that you know are good for you and that feel good for your soul? And it's different for everybody. You know, riding a horse, if you can't ride a horse, watching, you know, a movie about a horse, or just thinking about a horse, or meditating on a horse, you know, whatever it is, or just thinking about a beautiful experience that you had with a horse, you know, or how horses make you feel, and just tuning into that frequency. Because I think for a lot of us, you know, horses have that magical energy. And so to be able to just like close your eyes anytime that you find yourself sort of doom scrolling or whatever, you know, and be like, wait, I don't want to do this. And so what are the things on your list that help you to feel good and elevated and that bring you joy? Going for a walk, being in nature, sitting in the sun, putting your feet on the ground, watching a funny movie, you know, whatever it is, turning on music that you love, having a dance party, you know, all of these things help move energy through our body. And I think that's another important thing is if you do find yourself in that kind of doom scroll, or you do find yourself getting upset by the news of the world, move your body, get up and turn on music and move your body, or, you know, go for a walk and breathe and be consciously moving energy through your physical vessel so that it doesn't get stuck, you know? And so, and then so that you are, you know, kind of running the energy through you. And, you know, again, I'm not a scientist or anything, you know, in that realm. I'm an artist. But what I do know is that, you know, from Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein and all these people, they all said that frequency was where the medical world was going to be focused eventually. And so right now we know that our thoughts carry the frequency. And so if we want to heal ourselves, we are, you know, if we're choosing a high frequency, then when we go out into the world, that frequency is spread around us, you know, just like if we're in a lower vibration frequency, when we walk into a room, people who are sensitive can feel that. And so, you know, do we want to be spreading energy in the world that helps lift people up? Or do we want to be spreading energy in the world because we want other people to kind of, you know, we want to carry the weight of the world? What good is that doing? You know, what good is that doing for anybody when we're carrying that weight and we're carrying that out into the world? Then that makes other people who are empaths feel that weight. Whereas if we're keeping our energy high, and I don't mean to bypass, you know, like obviously if you have emotions or situations, you want to feel those emotions. But again, scientifically, there was a study that was done that said we only need to feel an emotion for 90 seconds in order to process it. So if we know that we're feeling sad or upset or angry, look at the clock, allow yourself 90 seconds, and then exhale it out and move your body to release it. And that's all you need to do. And if you keep feeling it, then feel it and release it. And choosing to keep release it, it'll, you know, the impact that it'll have, the weight that it'll carry will be less and less every time that it comes up. But again, it's
That's
those choices.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that one, but it does make sense. We do need to feel those emotions, but the problem comes when we start ruminating on them and staying with them and making them a part of who we are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about creating or consuming, which I think is so interesting because the more that we consume, especially things that aren't good for us, it really does become part of who we are. I was recently on Facebook and someone posted how horrible the world is. And I thought it's so interesting that we say that because a lot of people do say that. A lot of people
Mhm.
feel that, think that. And if we look at it from that perspective, certainly we will also feel that there's plenty of bad things that are happening, plenty of wrongs that are happening, children that are not being taken care of the way they should, all those things. But we can also look at it and see how much amazing good there is. Like, we have never had more opportunity, more comfort, so many things where our world right now offers also a lot of good. So, talk with us a little bit more about creation versus consumption and how we can lean more into creation to help our internal state of being.
Yeah, I love this question. This is a good one. Yes. So there's so many parts to this. So again, going back to, when it comes to what you want to create, because not everybody is an artist or they don't think of themselves as being an artist. And a lot of times when you say create versus consume, people are like, well, I'm not an artist. But you
Mhm.
don't have to be an artist. You can be, everybody is an artist in some way. If you're making food, you can create food that is beautiful and nutritious and nourishment. It's just like pure nourishment. You can create thoughts in your mind that are higher frequency. You can create special routines and rituals in your day that allow you to feel levity and that I think I have 7 healing practices that I talk about. So there's grounding, inspiration, movement, nourishment, gratitude, forgiveness, and grace. And I believe that those 7 practices, if we practice every single one of those, we create a foundation for our wellness that is pretty solid. I mean, you really can become your own greatest healer if you practice those 7 things every day. So we can just, kind of talk about creation from that perspective. So if you're grounding every day and from a creation perspective, that just means choosing to be connected to the earth and the present moment. And so when you're grounded, you're able to create because when you're consuming, if you're online, for instance, and you're reading something, you're in your mind, you're out of your body. So the whole concept of grounding is being back in your body. So what brings you into your body? Breath, focusing on the present moment. Sometimes it's just taking inventory of the things around you. I'm sitting, I have a roof over my head. I'm warm right now, just kind of taking inventory of things in this present moment so that you can bring yourself back in. Because again, we tend to be up out of our bodies in our thoughts. And so that brings you
Yeah.
back down. Yeah. So that's why grounding and putting your feet on the earth is so powerful. And again, like because we are these kind of batteries, when we put our feet on the earth, it's like when you are starting a car battery, you have to ground one of the wires. And so that is how you restart the battery. It's the same thing with us. We put our feet on the ground and we're recharging our battery and balancing the energy in our system. So it's super important. And then inspiration, inspire is like in spirit. So it is the things that help lift our spirit, the joy that we find. And, it's like we all know what brought us joy when we were kids. And for some reason, as we get older and we have the responsibilities, we forget what brought us joy when we were kids. So just trying to remember, like, what did you love to do? Did you love running through the forest? Did you love digging in sand? What is that? And then go do that, do some form of that wherever you are. And do it with the intention of being inspired. And, for some people, being inspired is going to an art museum or listening to motivational, like Neville Goddard and, like people like Jim Rohn and, listening to these kind of pep talks, spiritual pep talks. I love doing that. I think it's called Be Better Every Day, which is a podcast that has these old inspiring talks. I listen to that when I'm getting ready in the morning, just to kind of inspire myself. For me, that works. And then movement is not just about moving your body, although we all need to do that, going for a walk, yoga, whatever it is, moving, but it's also just like not keeping your thoughts stagnant. So it's allowing thoughts to move through you. So if you notice that you keep having a recurring thought, that means it's stuck. That's blocked energy. So, noticing, okay, I'm thinking this thought and then noticing, do I feel it in my body somewhere? And then thinking like, why is it that I'm like, what is the message in this thought? And if it's not a useful thought, then okay, I'm going to let it go. And then just exhaling it out and releasing it, and then what thought do I want to choose to replace it? What's a higher vibration thought or what's an empowering thought? And then nourishment is the same type of thing where, we think of nourishment with the food that we eat, but it's also the choices that we make. It's also everything, the food that we eat, the choices we make, the people we surround ourselves with. Are these
Yeah.
people filling us up or are they draining us? And if they're draining us, well, let's figure out how we can, move toward the people that do fill our cup. And then, forgiveness, gratitude, those are obviously so important right now. And just like you said, where people think like the world is a horrible place, anytime that you catch yourself thinking something like that, know that, yes, if you turn on the news, they report on all of the bad things because that's what keeps the ratings up. It's not because that's what's good for us. But if you
Yeah.
did think about what are all the babies being born, look at all the butterflies that are flying around. Look at all the, like look for this, listen to the birds, listen to and look at all of the beautiful things that are going. Look at the flowers that are growing up through the concrete. Do you know what I mean? Like look for the blessings and the magic because it's around. If you look for it, you will find it. Just like if you look for what's wrong, you'll find that too. So it's just tuning your frequency to what it is that you want to think and feel. And it's not bypassing. You have to acknowledge always, like I always go back to, we want to make sure we're not bypassing anything. We're definitely like acknowledge, yes, there is suffering in the world. There always has been and probably always will be. That's how we grow. If everything was comfortable and perfect all the time, we wouldn't grow. So we go back to things like cancer, which everybody thinks is this horrible thing. And I know that when people get the diagnosis of cancer, they're immediately confronted with their concept of death because that's the first thing that you think. And so, death is not a final horrible thing. It is a transition from physical into spirit. And I know that because I've seen so many people, I've actually physically witnessed people die. And I know that it is the end of a struggle. It's not the beginning of a struggle. And I know that, no matter what religion you are, we definitely move into spirit and it is a lighter place to be. And there is so much healing that we do here, even though it is hard. We heal, we learn, and we grow through challenge. So if the world is hard right now, it's because we're learning and we're growing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and very true also. Those are the places that we learn, or the places that are uncomfortable and difficult and a struggle. That's where we get new knowledge and wisdom in our life. Um I love too your discussion of creation because we do often have a specific idea of what creating something is, whether that's art or poetry or music. And I was talking with my husband about this the other day, and he's very analytical, very data oriented. And he was saying just how he admired people that can make music because that's way off his radar. But I thought about him, and he will go out in the woods. We have some acreage, and he will go out there and work to make trails that are better and things like that. And it's something that really grounds him, like you talked about. And I was thinking, like, right there, you think of stuff that I would never consider. Like, I would not be like, let's see how we can make this path flatter or whatever. I'd just be like, let's walk on the side. That's a lot of work. So
Yeah.
that creation, that creative energy can come to us in so many different ways. It doesn't have to look like anything specific. And I think we are all meant to be creators. So the trick maybe is finding, well, where are you creating things to add to the world? Whether that's, beautiful art or something that maybe we wouldn't normally look at in that way, something that's more analytical or scientific leaning. Also places where we can create versus consuming. Talk a little bit more about how we can improve our intuition and our clarity in life.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it goes along with this idea of consumption versus creation. So when we're in that creative space, we're in touch with our intuition, and our intuition is basically the voice of our soul. And so when we want to get more in that intuitive space, we have to quiet down and not be consuming and allow ourselves to be still. And so that's really challenging. It's really challenging because, especially, so I don't have a smartphone, but I remember how it was when I had one, and I have an iPad and I am online. So I'm not like completely disconnected, but
Yeah.
I don't have the same tendencies. So the majority of people, for instance, will have their smartphone and they'll be walking down the street with their smartphone in front of them. They'll be standing in line for coffee with their smartphone in front of them. They'll be waiting in line to get on an airplane with their smartphone in front of them. It's always in front of them. And so if you want to be in touch with your intuition, if your smartphone's in front of your face, you're never going to be in touch with your intuition because you're constantly seeking information outside of yourself, and your intuition is inside of yourself. So if you want to be connected with your intuition, a lot of mystics and psychics say you need to be meditating, and a lot of people have a really big problem with the idea of meditation. And so I have to say that at times when I don't want to sit still, like sometimes your body just wants to move and you still want to receive that kind of message from your soul. And so for me, and I know a lot of other people, they receive that information when they're walking.
Mm-hmm.
No headphones in while you're walking either, because that's essentially just a different form of the screen in front of your face, right? So I can say with one exception, and that is if you're listening to healing frequency music, because that will affect your energy in your body. But if you're not listening to healing frequency music that's specifically attuned to connecting you with your intuition, then don't listen to anything. Because when you're out in nature, you do hear the birds sing and you do notice things that you don't notice otherwise. And then that allows you to notice and hear messages from your soul. And so if you want to get out of that sort of consumption habit, the first thing to do is to notice when you're doing it and then to choose a different pattern. If it's if it's like, if you want to think about it as a thought loop, it's reframing the thoughts, it's reframing your habits. And it's really like, if you want to go into that intuitive space, it's giving yourself time. If your day is really busy with work physically, where you can't really like take time to go for a walk, then take like 10 minutes before you go to bed at night. And I turn on healing frequency music every single night before I go to sleep to allow my system time to wind down. And I don't, sometimes it'll have like, I'll put it on YouTube and it'll have, like a graphic or something. But most of the time, it's just a black screen with specific healing frequencies to help my nervous system to just chill out. And then that sends a signal to my body that I'm in that space, and I sometimes have like my journal next to me, and I'll get, kind of things that I want to write down. But if you just allow yourself that space, in the morning is a good time to do it as well, because then you start your day not from like hitting the ground running and starting everything, but from a very gentle, it kind of eases your nervous system into the day. It's a really beautiful way to start the day. I think, like before you get your coffee or your tea or whatever, just sitting with yourself for just a few moments to just kind of breathe, and then you'll receive messages, and throughout the day, you'll want to tune back into that quiet space. So if you can start and end the day with that, I think that's a good way to start developing a closer relationship with your intuition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful, and making it intentional. I know in the horse world, a lot of people will say like cleaning the horse stalls is like where you get the inspiration.
Yeah.
And it's that same idea that you're freeing that space around you to become open to that and to listen, like you say, from the inside out instead of listening out all the outside voices. So I love that. And I think anyone can find it, whether it's turning off everything while you're driving, that can even be a space. I think it's easy to make excuses. I don't have time, but it's so easy to turn your phone on and you're like, oops, I just scrolled for 30
30
minutes when
minutes. Yeah.
I got on there to check my calendar or something.
Yep. Yeah.
So that intention really makes a huge difference.
Well, and the other thing that I want to say, and just because I know that this is kind of like something that's been coming up, is the algorithm is designed to make you addicted to it. So for me, being sort of like the rebel by nature, as soon as I think about the fact that that's designed to suck me in, I'm like, then
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So if you have like that rebel nature, just remind yourself, like, this is designed to make me lose myself in it. And it's not designed for my best interest. So if I want to take my power back and sort of have my best interests at heart, what do I want to be doing with my time? You know?
Yeah. Great point, too, because it is highly designed to keep us on there. That
Yeah.
is the goal of the people that created it. How long can we keep an audience on there and cycle through that? What if we designed our life with the same intention, that we really had something we wanted to accomplish and our design focused on that? It's
Yeah.
really easy to lose it and just go with what comes easy. And they've already designed that
Well,
addictive
exactly.
nature for us. So, but
Exactly.
if we could turn it,
Yeah, and to your point, I think a lot of people have lost touch with what it is that they want in life because they're so used to sort of giving their attention away. And so that's why, like, for me, like, my art was the original catalyst to doing my creative work, but the work that I'm doing, and I think you're doing as well, is just allowing people to, like, holding space for people to reconnect with themselves in a way that they never would. Because if they just keep doing the things that are, like scrolling and watching TV and doing all the things that society sort of normalizes, it completely takes us away from who we are and why we're here.
yeah,
And I think horses really do remind us how important it is to just be these beautiful, majestic beings that we are. We don't need to
Yeah.
have, kind of all the status and material things and whatever. We are beautiful, majestic beings just as horses are, you know?
Yeah. Definitely a huge degree of acceptance there with horses. That's something that we talk a lot about on the podcast, how being in a place where you're accepted exactly who you are and realizing that like that's a good thing. Um yeah, that's very relevant topic in the in the things that we talk about. Talk a little bit more about how if people have maybe lost themselves, gotten caught up in, the path that we're supposed to take, the consumerism, all those other things. What are some things that we can do to to first find and then lean into more of our soul's mission, the thing that we feel called to do or we feel drawn to? And maybe how can we even find that if we have no idea what that might be?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So there's two places that I start with everybody. And the first thing is your values. What are the values that are important to you? And it doesn't matter how much media you consume, you know what's important to you. And I think the majority of people are very um, connected to and attached to helping save the world because they have something inside of themselves that wants to be of service to others. They just don't know what that is, and they don't know where they can fit it into the life that they've already created. And so, looking for ways that you're already being of service to others, maybe it's small things, like I said before, like I was always the person that my friends would come to for, advice or feedback or just to listen. If that's something that, you find yourself doing, then how can you do that a little bit more? You don't have to necessarily, start a career or anything doing that, but maybe just notice when you are doing that, how it feels and how the other person feels, and then just go from there. Just tuning into what you're already good at, is a really important thing, because a lot of times, and I actually used to coach people on building passion-based businesses. And I think that's, back when I was doing that about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't as much noise going on in the world as there is now. And because of that, I think people can't even think about what they're passionate about because they just don't know. And they see cats and dogs and all these things
Yeah.
in their algorithm, and they're like, that's what I'm interested in. But I think going back to what you were interested in as a kid is a huge indicator. Maybe when you were a kid, you wanted to be an astronaut and you don't want to be an astronaut anymore. But what was it about being an astronaut that somehow, and just kind of digging into that? I think journaling is super powerful for people if they want to do that self-exploration. And so, yeah, I would start with your values and just writing down a list of like what your top 5 to 10 values are. And then, going from there, I would look at what your strengths are, because when you have natural strengths, that's kind of, those are your gifts, those are the things that come easy to you. And they say, if you want to create you want to create work that feels like play, not that feels like a job. So, what are the things that you're good at and that are easy for you? And, because something that's easy for you might not be easy for me. And so there's something there. And so just kind of exploring that. And also, like, when it comes to life purpose, so many of my clients come to me and they're like expecting their life purpose to be this big, grand thing. And I don't think that your life purpose is what you do. I think your life purpose is who you are and how you show up. And sometimes, like, maybe my purpose, part of it was to be there for my mom when she passed. And then part of
Yeah.
my purpose is to be a good mom to my daughters as they're navigating this world, and to be a good wife to my husband, and to, and so that's all part of our purpose. And so I think it's really about being aware, not attached to any type of accolades or achievements, but just being aware of what we've already been doing naturally. And then just expanding on that, and being kind of mindful about what we're bringing into the world and how we're showing up.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. I think in the culture of the United States, a lot of times we do define ourselves by how we make money,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not necessarily who we have to be. And even our life purpose can be outside of that. Like money might just be the necessity we need to take care of our families and ourselves and whatnot. And purpose and who we are and the things that we should be spending on our time on don't necessarily have to be attached to our income. They may be, they could be. I know a lot of people who do it, and it's amazing when you can find that, but that doesn't necessarily need to limit you if that's not the case for you. What is some advice you would give someone who's deep in the trenches of things? We talk about meditating and going on walks, and that sounds great. And sometimes life gets really overwhelming, and it's really difficult to find time to feed our soul in the way that would be helpful to us. And sometimes the emotions can get so overwhelming. If you're really just feeling overwhelmed, like you don't know your way through, what are some things you would suggest for people?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and it's really hard to sometimes for people who are really in it, in the thick of it, and I've been there, but I think if you can always test yourself and develop when you're not in the thick of it, develop a practice of thinking the things that you're grateful for. Then when you're in the trenches and you're going through these difficult times, just knowing that you're learning things. And so trying to figure out what it is that you need to be grateful for in that moment. So for instance, when my sister was going through the last couple of weeks of her life, it was very hard, and she was in and out of the hospital, and I was having to, feed her through. It was just a very intense period of time. And then her kids, she didn't want to be like knowing what was going on, and so keeping that bubble around them. And at the same time, I was having all these, I'm so sensitive to the spirit world. So I was seeing like flashes and, crazy things going on. And it was very overwhelming. And at the same time, so beautiful. And so I think when you are in the trenches of what's going on, remind yourself that if you look for them, you will see things to be grateful for. If you look for things, you will see beauty. And even if it means that somebody's life is coming to an end, you will have, if you do, you will have grief. And in grief, it's the proof that you loved somebody and that you felt so intensely loved and you still love this person. Grief is just basically unexpressed love. And so finding, reframing the things that could kind of send you downward in terms of the frequency and trying to find the things that will help lift you up. And again, surrounding yourself with people and circumstances that do help elevate you energetically and gratitude is the highest frequency and it's the easiest way. So for anybody who is depressed, finding things to be grateful for, even if it feels in that moment like you're not really physically feeling the gratitude, but knowing the gratitude, the more that you kind of exercise that muscle, the easier it is, and the faster it will help, kind of raise your frequency to a more higher vibration state where you're happier and kind of able to be in joy. And it's interesting because when we were going through this very difficult time with my sister, and then right after, or right after my mom died, right after my mom died, and then my dad got sick, and, then my sister, and all of these things that were going on, it just was really hard sometimes in the thick of it to think of what I was grateful for. But if you remember to do it, it's like this gift that you're giving yourself. And then, when you have children or when you have people around you who are struggling, and you can remind them that gratitude is the way through. Gratitude is the way through. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree that sometimes it can be, especially when things are really heavy and overwhelming, it can just be the smallest step in the right direction, which in that moment might just be finding one thing you're grateful for, that you can see the sun out the window or
Yes.
whatever it might be,
Yeah.
that can help alter our direction a little bit and also reset our minds a little bit so that we can lean more into that, even when
Yeah.
it's really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful. To wrap up, can you share with everyone where they can find you, how they can take advantage of your knowledge and the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a website. It's brittmichaelian.art. And that I have, all my offerings on there. And then I'm on Instagram as well. If anybody wants, I have something called the Quantum Kickstart, which is a free guide for anybody who wants 3 simple exercises to really get you in tune with your intuition and what you want in life. So that's if you go to brittmichaelian.art and /quantum-kickstart. And I'll send you the link so that if anybody wants that
Yeah.
in the description, it's a really powerful,
Perfect.
it's completely free, and it's a really powerful way to just kind of get you moving into that direction where you're more aligned with, what your soul is trying to communicate with you, and just get clarity on what you want to bring into the world. Yeah. And then my
Beautiful. Yeah.
artwork,
Thank you.
yeah,
Go
my
ahead.
artwork's on my website, obviously, brittmichaelian.art. And then I also have a Substack. So that's brittmichaelian.substack. And it's 2 T's, Britt with 2 T's. And then it's like Michael Ian in my last name. Yeah. So,
Okay, perfect. And yeah,
yeah.
we'll definitely include all those links and everything people might want to find.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much for being here and for the things you shared. There were a lot of practical tips that are easy to implement that you shared with people that I think can really help them to lean into creating a beautiful life. So I appreciate you being here and talking, especially about your experience, which can be really heavy. And the way you talk about it, you can just see the difference that can make when we are able to see the beauty and the good in life despite the hard things that come with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you heal.